Hi, welcome to Joy for the Journey. I'm Renee. Today we're going to do a bookshelf tour, but the focus is going to be on how do I happen to organize my bookshelf. I'm not claiming to have any perfect or specific system that everybody needs to follow, but it is super fun to see how different moms organize their bookshelves so that we can begin to make our own little rules and figure out how we want to customize our bookshelves. So, how are we going to do that? Do we do it by genre, by subject area, by grade level? Should we have some fancy baskets with labels or maybe magazine holders? Should we have multiple bookshelves? Should we pack a lot of our books away that we won't need all the time up in our attic or garages? How could we do it? Well, I'm going to just show you what works for me. I combined a variety of strategies to utilize my space most efficiently and to be most practical to help me to find my books. So I think in terms of practicality, but also aesthetics. So I like to, once I have them organized by genre, subject, unit study, or other factors, I will try to make it look aesthetic and organized by height. However, I will compromise or balance it with my organization by category. For example, this shelf has literature, but I needed a place to put those math type read-alouds. So rather than organizing these math read-alouds out of category by putting them in height order, I went ahead and said it's okay, these are higher, but I want to keep them together and they need a spot, and that's where they could fit. So balancing out practicality and aesthetics is important to me. I like it to look nice. I also want to just point out that I organize in terms of subject for things like science books together, things like history books together, but I separate science from science in terms of level. So these are books that are on my children's level now for science and history. And the ones that are not are going to be on higher shelves in my bookshelf that's organized more in terms of levels. And then I think for fiction books, I think in terms of picture books that are not of a series, picture books that are in a series, picture books that are read only for certain seasons of the year. And there I also employ another strategy where, I can't fit all of my books, but I try to put as many books as I can out on my bookshelves where I can see them, for the simple reason that if I pack away too many books, even if I'm not going to use them for a while, then if I go to a free library or find a sale on a book or get a book as a gift, and I know it belongs within, let's say, history, that books that I'm not going to use for a while, but they happen to be in the attic, oh man, now I have to climb up in the attic and go and put this book into that box. So I try to have my books out and just organize them as seen. However, the books that I have found that are working for me to be in the attic are my Christmas books, because I really am not getting Christmas books hardly ever. I pretty much have the ones I'm going to have, for now. If I get more, it might be at Christmas time anyway, and I can just go ahead and pull those out once a year. I also do keep a box of chapter books, but they're just like classics, like Anne of Green Gables, or other classics that I'm not currently adding to a series, or that I really feel pretty confident that we are not going to be reading for a while, and I just simply don't have room for them on my shelves. And then for adult books, I do keep some commentaries and, Bible books up in my attic that I know in this season of life I'm just not going to get to, so they're in my attic. So another thought is, some people have wondered, well, should I use baskets so that it has like a nice little label, or maybe magazine file holders? And sure, you could, but here's why I don't. They take up more space. Baskets, even if they have this much of an edge, it's going to take up space that could be for one or more books. And the other thing is, the basket limits you in two ways. One is that, depending on the height of your shelf, if these were in a basket and I want to get this book out, I can't get it out unless I take the whole basket off the shelf. Now, it worked really well in the public schools. The heights of the shelves could be adjusted, and I was able to use baskets because I had a high access rate on my shelves. You have a whole classroom, okay? And you do want things to be labeled for that reason. But it works well in the context of our home not to use baskets. The other reason I don't use baskets or magazine files is because it limits my space width-wise. Again, the width of the basket, but also, let's say I wanted to have all of my science books, or at least a branch of science, into one basket. But guess what? They all fit except for this set. Now I need a whole other basket for this set, or I got to compromise my system and fit it into a different basket, or have another science basket that's only half full. And again, that's a waste of space. So that is why I do not use those. I could see utilizing those magazine file organizers maybe for your shelf if you do unit studies and you want, each one labeled by the month, August, September, and so on. But again, the same problem, you have some limits. If you have, the right amount of books to fit in that magazine file for August, great, but what about September? What if you happen to have too many books? Now you need 2 for September, or maybe 1.5, and now you have this wasted space of a 1.5 filled magazine file folder. So my solution to that is just know and have it organized on the shelf, rubber band them off, use a sticky note, or you could cut a file folder and have the little lip of the file folder sticking out with the month on it or the name of your unit study. For me, again, I just pull out the month, I kind of know, and I put it in this basket, and at the end of the unit, when I'm ready to transition, I put it back on the shelf and get my next set of books. So again, I organize in terms of subject, in terms of genre, and also in terms of grade level and in terms of unit study, depending on the need. And of course, I do pack away some books. So I think using a combination of strategies will help you to be more efficient with your space and more practical in terms of your ability to find books. And it will allow you to also balance out aesthetics with practicality. What you see here is the first bookshelf we're going to look at. It's our homeschool area bookshelf, and as you can see, it is a cube shelf. I had bought it originally to organize with those slide out fabric boxes, but it ended up being a bookshelf by necessity, and I actually like it that way because it creates some definite spaces to organize. So here's how we do this bookshelf. These are books that are not high access, first of all, for my kids. These are books really that I'm pulling from. They're not current books that we are necessarily reading, but more ones I'm pulling as needed. And that way it stays a little bit more organized since it's not a high access bookshelf. So this first box at the top is literature. What we have here is things that would go great for our morning basket rotations that include Charlotte Mason components like habit training or character type books, things like poetry, and we have also some math related read alouds, and we have some picture study books and things of that nature. Then we have on this shelf science, then below here is science and science, and then this one is history, and their picture books. And then right here we have seasonal books. So we do pack away our Christmas books because there are just too many of them and we only need them once a year. And I definitely won't forget about getting my Christmas books out of the attic, but I might not feel like going up in the attic multiple times a year for just a few books here and there. For example, in January, I want to have this ready to go. It's our Winnie the Pooh book, and we also read at other points in the year when the kids ask. In the spring, I want to have books like Peter Rabbit and this sheep book and some other rabbit and spring related books having to do with butterflies, plants, Earth Day, Arbor Day, trees, things of that nature. Then in the summer, I decided I would make a point to read this book if we were interested in it so it doesn't get forgotten about. It's called The Treasure Tree. It's a pretty neat little book. Then I want to make sure that we read James Herriot's Treasury for Children. It's a beautiful farm-related book, and it's quite lovely, and I don't want to forget about that. So I decided that that is a fall book, as well as our C.W. Anderson, Billy and Blaze books. I don't want to forget about these, and I think when I think of the fall, I think of farms and I think of horses. So I set that here. Then also we have our picture books for Little House. The chapter books I put aside for much later because my kids are 6 and under, 3, 6 and under. But I don't want to forget about these. I think of these as a good fall/November series to read. So I put them there. So it goes in order from January to the end of the year. And again, Christmas is in the attic. And some other books that would be related to the seasons may not be here. They might be in our current unit studies shelf in our other room, and I will piece them in where they belong by the month. The final shelf is just some favorite picture books that are kind of random, that don't go along with a series. And on this side would be specific classic tales, fairies, folk tales, fables, and things like that. And so I put these underneath here because these are our like kind of literature that we want to hit on, poetry and character education and that. And this is another type of literature that we want to hit on. This is our second bookshelf in the homeschool / living room area. What goes on this shelf is picture books that go in a series. There's more than one of a kind. So things like Franklin books, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie series, the Berenstain Bears, the Little Critter books, Curious George. These are neat. Alice in Bibleland. Dr. Seuss books. I do have a bigger anthology that can't fit here that's hiding behind some other books on that last shelf. And then little golden books. And so why I like putting these all here is, one, I don't have room on the other shelf, but also because these are high access books. My daughter Grace likes to get to these a lot. And so it's nice that they're separated from the books that are lower access, where I can guarantee they're not really touched as much, and it makes it much easier to keep the shelves organized. Okay, here is my second bookshelf, ceiling to floor. And how I organize it is just simply starting at the lowest level of books and working our way up. So the bottom shelf is books my 1-year-old can access. These are board books. The second shelf is leveled readers for early readers, and I put them in order from my first all the way up in level. However, I do not mix in the history and science leveled readers. I put the history in one chunk together and the science, so that if I'm trying to do a specific unit and I want to find my Washington book, I don't have to try to remember what level it was to find it. I just know that all my history ones are chunked together over here and all my science ones. Then this shelf is, so here is kindergarten books that after my son finished kindergarten, some of them I put back in their correct place based on subject or other criteria. And some of them are books I probably wouldn't read again anyway until my daughter's in kindergarten. So I'm keeping them here, and they look a little messy right now, but that's okay. And then over here is books, as I find books that I go, that would go good for next year for my son for second grade. I want to make sure I read that to him and I don't want to forget. I just stick it here. And then when summer comes, I'll go through and kind of finalize what books I want to fit and where in our unit studies or themes for science and history. And then I just have some curriculum I got that would be for later. Then the next shelf, our fourth shelf, is books for this year for our journey through the continents. So I started from August all the way to May, and I put them in clumps based on the continents from North America and so on, so that I could find them. And last year when I did the same thing for kindergarten, I literally put them in order month by month. I rubber banded them. But this year I didn't end up. And what I do is, so each new month I take the clump of books off the shelf and I keep them in a nice wicker basket next to the bookshelf out in the homeschool area. And then when we're done with that month, I put it back where it was, and I get the next month's and put it in the wicker basket. And so whatever we're reading stays in the basket, whatever we're not reading for the current unit study comes back on the shelf. And then I'll decide after this if I'm going to refile these books away or if I'm going to keep them here until Grace is in second grade, and maybe we'll loop back around and I'll up the level for Josiah and he'll revisit it on a second level. And then for Grace, do it at her level at that time, when, I guess first grade actually I should say, is when I would possibly do it again for her. Then our fifth shelf is chapter books that I'm collecting, like chapter book series. So things like missionary series, the Little House books, and I put the Little House books behind. This is actually 2 books deep, and I put like Chronicles of Narnia behind, because those are series I'm not going to forget about. Like I know I'm going to eventually read my kids the Chronicles of Narnia and the Little House, so I can hide those. Whereas I put these out because if I find a sale and I want to add another missionary, I want to see which ones I already have at a glance. Or if I want to get book 14, I need to remember which ones I already have, so it's there. And so just chapter books we're not going to be reading for a while possibly, but I'm collecting. If I want to, get more history chapter books and, historical fiction, I can see what I already have at a glance. More history books. And then we have our binders for different subject areas where I can pull out things I've pre-printed. And then tucked in here is books I will read to Grace when she's a little older. They're very girl-based books. Well, Grace and Aaliyah, my 2 daughters. And that's pretty much this shelf. This bookshelf is in our other living room, and what I put on here is books that we've already read. Of course, I could pack those away, and then maybe I will, but I guess I just like seeing the chapter books that I've read to my son, and then books I've read are up here, just extra Bibles, and other books I've read here. Then I needed a place to house our nature identification books. I also like keeping them here, not only just as a record of what we've read, of course we do keep a reading log as well, but also because once I've read them to my son, they eventually have or will become his reading materials. It's nice because they've already been previewed by me reading them to him. Of course, I may cycle back through favorite chapter book series or books that I would like to reread when my daughters are older. All right, then this tiny little bookshelf in the same living room is books I have not read yet on the bottom and may eventually want to read, so it's a good place. If I'm done with one book, I can come and look. I also keep books that are actually more next up on my list to read on my nightstand. Here's another tip to keep books organized. While I do encourage my kids to go on the shelves at any time, get books as they want, it is nice if they have a basket of books that they are, more interested in, and that way they're going fishing for books in the basket as often or more often than the shelf, and that keeps the shelves a little more organized as well. And the nice thing is I'll keep this basket right on the couch, and he'll just go cuddle on the couch and read books quite a lot, and there it is. It's easy to just stick them back in the basket and not have to figure out where they were on the shelf. This is the wicker basket where I keep the current unit we're on. I also utilize a basket system for my 1-year-old and babies when they're little. I keep a basket by the rocking chair, and they use it to climb on. Just kidding. That way, when they first wake up in the morning and I'm nursing them, I can include some book time then, also at their midday nap and before bed. So it's a combination of learning books and fun stories. And of course, we have a morning basket / what I call a lunch and literature basket in our dining area, where we house books that I described on this shelf as literature and special purpose books. So that would be things like our Bibles and other important literature we want them to get doses of, Charlotte Mason components and books that help us with that, among other things. If you're interested, I have a whole video on this basket. All right, let's do a fun little quiz. What do you do when there's a book that could fit in one or more categories and you're trying to decide which one? First, I always try to decide based on a combination of practicality and aesthetics. So I want to think practically, where will I naturally go looking for this book that makes sense naturally to me? And 2, where would it look best if there's an equal play between 2 places? So for example, this one Little Red Riding Hood could go with my literature, classic literature, fairy tale, folk, that category, or it could go with the Little Golden Books. And because I'm familiar with this book and I don't think I'll forget to read it because it's a favorite, I put it with the Little Golden Books. It looks more aesthetic there because now the binding matches all the rest of the Little Golden Books, and the Little Golden Books are on my daughter's high access shelves, and she really loves this book. So that's why I chose there instead of with the other classic literature, although it used to be with the classic literature. This book, St. Valentine's, this could be in history, this could be in seasonal literature, this could be in the month of February on your unit study month by month shelf, and it has been in all of those places one time or another. And right now it is with my history books sectioned together with other holiday history books. So St. Patrick's Day, Valentine's Day, Martin Luther King Jr., all those key figures. If I have, one main book for each of those holidays that I use, I try to put them together. President's Day is a little tricky because I feel like I have so many of those, so I'll kind of maybe put those with history too, but in their own little area with presidents. What about this book? The Icky Bug Alphabet Book. Right away, people might go, oh, it's an alphabet book, so I'm going to put it with my phonics and alphabet books. Well, I actually don't use it primarily for the purpose of teaching letters and sounds. So I do not house it that way. I house it as a science book. And because I have an entire series of these alphabet books that are all in different life science type topics, I put them all together in my science section. And then if I did want to use it, one day, instead of reading her normal
alphabet book, I could pull this out and read it. But because it's pretty wordy, I would have to use it more for the purpose of learning and also reinforcing letters, but not primarily for teaching letters, in my opinion.
All right, there were my bookshelves. I really hope that you enjoyed hearing how I organize my books. How do you organize yours? Maybe this will inspire you to love how you organize your books or to adjust them a little bit. Either way, I want to thank you in advance for please liking and subscribing. It really does make a difference.